Chapter 13, The Triune God and the Laws of Logic, the Foundation of All Reality. Breaking news, all logic depends on the Triune God. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves for the ultimate reality check. The laws of logic don't just exist, they are grounded in the very nature of the Triune God. Without the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, not only would logic collapse, but rational thought, consistency, and knowledge itself would be impossible. So, before you say, well, logic is just something we use to think, let's ask some fundamental questions. Where do the laws of logic come from? Are they just human inventions? Did they evolve like bacteria? Atheists have no answer, but the Bible does. Logic is not some arbitrary rule imposed on reality. It is a reflection of the eternal, self-existent, and relational nature of God. And here's the kicker. The laws of logic are inherently Trinitarian. Each law is distinct, yet they function in perfect unity, just as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are distinct in personhood, yet one in being. The three laws of logic and the Triune God. The laws of logic are universal, immaterial, and unchanging. Why? Because they reflect the eternal, unchanging nature of God. The law of identity. A is A. A thing is what it is and not something else. The law of non-contradiction. A is not non-A. A thing cannot be itself and not itself at the same time in the same way. The law of excluded middle. Either A or non-A. No third option. A proposition is either true or false. There is no in-between. Let's explore each of these laws and see why they exist only because of the Triune God. 1. The law of identity, rooted in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The law of identity states that a thing is itself and cannot be something else. The Father is the Father, not the Son or the Holy Spirit. The Son is the Son, not the Father or the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the Holy Spirit, not the Father or the Son. The Triune God is the perfect embodiment of identity. Each person of the Trinity is fully God, yet distinct in identity. Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. I am who I am. God defines himself. He is not dependent on anything outside of himself. He is who he is. John chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word, Logos, was with God, distinction, and was God, unity. If there were no Trinity, identity itself would be meaningless, because there would be no eternal distinction and unity to ground it. Atheists cannot explain why things are what they are. Without God, why does anything have identity at all? Why is a cat and not something else? They can't say, but Christians can, because the law of identity is a reflection of the Trinity. 2. The law of non-contradiction, rooted in the eternal distinctions of the Trinity. The law of non-contradiction says that something cannot be both itself and not itself at the same time and in the same way. The Father is not the Son. The Son is not the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is not the Father. Matthew chapter 28, verse 19, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. One name, unity, yet three distinct persons, distinction. If the universe were purely random, contradictions should be possible, but they are not. Why? Because God is never confused within himself. If God were a monolithic being, like Islam's Allah, there would be no eternal distinctions, and thus no foundation for non-contradiction. Everything would collapse into undifferentiated oneness, making distinction arbitrary, like the philosophy of Adi Shankaracharya. Where all distinction would collapse, there would be no distinction between oxygen and hydrogen. If God were multiple gods, like popular Hinduism, reality would be full of contradictions because different gods would have different natures and approval of reality. Only the Trinity provides a rational foundation for why contradictions are impossible. 3. The law of excluded middle, rooted in the absolute truth of God. The law of excluded middle states that something is either true or false. There is no in-between. The Son of God is either Son or he is not. He cannot be partially Son and partially Father. The same applies to the Father and the Holy Spirit. God is either God or he is not. John 8, verse 58. Before Abraham was, I am. God either exists or he does not. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. Whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists. Sin is either rebellion against God or it is not. 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. Sin is lawlessness. John chapter 14, verse 6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If Jesus is the truth, then there is no middle ground between truth and falsehood. If God were not absolute truth, there would be no absolute distinction between truth and falsehood. Atheists cannot justify why contradictions don't exist. Without an absolute standard of truth, why should anything be either true or false? They don't know, but Christians do. 4. Perichoresis, how the laws of logic relate like the Trinity. The law of identity, A is A, implies the law of non-contradiction. A is not non-A. If A is A, then it cannot also be non-A at the same time. If the Father is the Father, then he cannot also be the Son. The law of non-contradiction implies the law of excluded middle, either A or non-A. If A cannot be non-A, then it must be one or the other, no third option. If Son of God is either Son or not Son, there is no middle ground. The laws of logic are one and one law implies the other, just like the perichoresis of the Triune God. John chapter 14, verse 10 and 11. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit exist in a perfect relational unity. Likewise, the laws of logic exist in a structured unity. Each law implies the others. Atheists cannot explain why logic is unified, but Christians can because logic is a reflection of God's triune nature, the Trinity and the foundation of all thought, science, and life. Reality only makes sense because of God. The big revelation? Everything, yes, everything you see, think, know, and experience is grounded in the triune God of the Bible. That's right. Without the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, you wouldn't just lack morality or reason. You wouldn't exist at all. Atheists want you to believe that reality just holds itself together. No cause, no intelligence, no rational foundation. It just is. But let's think logically, which, ironically, only works because God exists. Science depends on predictable laws. Laws require order. Order requires a mind behind it. But atheists say reality just happens. That doesn't sound very scientific, does it? Now, we already explored laws of logic. Let's now explore how science, morality, mathematics, consciousness, and even social order are only possible because of the triune nature of God. 1. The uniformity of nature. Why science needs the triune God. Let's play a game. Why does gravity work today the same as it did yesterday? Why do chemical reactions always follow the same rules? Why does math hold true no matter where you are in the universe? Science requires uniformity, the belief that nature is stable, repeatable, and predictable. Otherwise, every experiment is meaningless. But here's the big question. Why is nature uniform? Atheists have no answer. If everything is just random physical processes, why should we expect consistency? If the universe is just an accident, why should it follow rational, predictable laws? Colossians chapter 1, verse 17. In him all things hold together. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. He upholds the universe by the word of his power. Translation. Science only works because God makes it work. Atheist response. The universe just follows rules, okay? It's just the way things are. Stop asking questions. Maybe there are infinite universes and we just got lucky. Translation: they don't have an answer. Only the Triune God can account for the unity and diversity in scientific laws, just as he exists as one in being and three in person. 2. Mathematics, the Trinity and absolute truth. Mathematics is objective, unchanging, and universal. But why? Numbers exist independently of human thought. No one invents math. It's discovered. 1, 1, 2 is always true. But why? Mathematics reflects the unity and diversity of the Trinity. 1. Oneness of God's being. Many. Diversity of persons in the Trinity. Relationship. How numbers interact. Proverbs chapter 8, verse 27 to 29. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he marked out the foundations of the earth. Mathematical truths exist because they are grounded in the rational nature of God. Atheists use math, but they can't explain why math exists in the first place. 3. Morality, the ultimate atheist contradiction. Atheists love talking about morality. Religion is evil. Christians are bad people. You don't need God to be good. Wait a second. Evil? Bad? Good? Those words only make sense if morality is real. But if evolution is true and we're just advanced pawn scum, what does good even mean? Atheism's morality problem. If morality is just a survival mechanism, then nothing is truly right or wrong. If morality is based on human opinion, then Hitler wasn't wrong. He was just unpopular. If morality is constantly changing, then today's good could be tomorrow's evil. But God's morality is absolute. Romans chapter 2, verse 15, the law is written on their hearts. Micah chapter 6, verse 8, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God. Translation: you know right from wrong because God put it in you. Atheists borrow Christian morality to argue against Christianity. They say, morality is just an illusion, but let me tell you why you're wrong. See the contradiction? Only the Trinity accounts for both the absolute standard of goodness, God's nature, and the relational aspect of moral law, how we love one another. 4. Consciousness, the mind that shouldn't exist. All right, science nerds, explain this one. Why are you aware of yourself? Atheists say your brain is just neurons firing. But how does electricity produce self-awareness? If evolution were true, you'd expect only reactive creatures, beings that respond to their environment without thought, like a Roomba vacuum. But humans aren't just reacting, we're reflecting. Why am I here? What is my purpose? How do I know I exist? No chemical reaction in the universe explains this. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. God created man in his own image. Translation: your mind isn't just brain activity, it's a reflection of God's image. Meanwhile, science says, we don't know where consciousness comes from. But trust us, it evolved. Maybe it's just an illusion. Shut up and trust the experts. Translation: they have no idea. Only the Triune God, who exists in eternal relationship within himself, can account for human self-awareness. Final thoughts. Who's really trusting science? So, let's sum this up. Logic exists because God exists. The Trinity explains why logical distinctions exist. The laws of logic reflect the triune nature of God. Without the Trinity, knowledge is impossible. Science only works because of God. Mathematics is grounded in God's nature. Morality is absolute because God is holy. Consciousness only makes sense because we are made in God's image. Meanwhile, science says, logic is just there, bro. There's no reason for logic, but let's trust it anyway. Maybe logic evolved too. Everything came from nothing, for no reason, with no purpose. Stop asking questions and just trust the randomness. Yeah, no thanks. If you trust logic reality, guess what? You just admitted it depends on the Triune God. But don't worry, the atheists will be back tomorrow using logic, math, and morality to argue that none of these things actually exist, while cashing their research grants.